as well as the Chairman of the Board of Directors, Mr. Dennis Chung, to bring greetings and remarks. So Richard, Dennis? Followed by Dennis Chung.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I will be very brief. I think, let me welcome you first to this town hall consultation on our comprehensive disaster risk management policy. We all know, I think I'm kind of speaking to the converted in terms of the persons here in the room and to our general audience out in radio world and persons that are on Facebook and other social media platform know all too well our vulnerabilities to natural hazards and all forms of hazard. We sit as a country in the North Atlantic hurricane belt that makes us very vulnerable to hurricanes. We sit on a very active seismic plate, makes us very vulnerable to earthquakes, and we know of the advent of climate change that makes us as well vulnerable to the climate change imperatives that is impacting not only us in Jamaica but the globe. So in terms of our vulnerabilities, it has been essential that we practice sound disaster risk management policies and procedures in Jamaica. And in terms of concerted effort to guide disaster management, the process would have dated back officially, I would say, to 1980 in terms of the formation of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management coming out of the 1979 flood rains, looking at the formulation of our national disaster plan, the first disaster risk management legislation in the wider Caribbean, and leading into that, how we would then respond to natural events, especially hurricanes that have impacted Jamaica. So because of that, it became essential that we look at how we plan in terms of our comprehensive disaster risk management processes. And part of that, in terms of looking at our comprehensive disaster risk management, comprehensive disaster risk management looks at how you group all aspects or all phases of the disaster risk management cycle to ensure that you're using that to build resilience. And so we embarked on a process many years ago, dated back to about 2014, to look at developing a national comprehensive disaster risk management policy. We'd have had a legislation. Then we repealed that legislation to have a very modern legislation in 2015, but there was not any policy to guide that process. And from your legislative, your national legislative process, what you actually need first is a policy. And then coming off that, you develop your legislation, your regulations, plans, procedures to guide the process. So our process dated back to about 2014. And coming out of that, we ensure that in a couple years ago, in about 2019, we started the process again to look at, yes, we really need to have this comprehensive disaster risk management policy. And the process was further fast-tracked with our IDB processes through the Ministry of Finance to ensure that we got the necessary support to push the development of the policy. It took on a process where you look at bringing all the players in the national disaster risk management apparatus to ensure that we are really impacting the country's disaster risk management imperatives. And so it was a large stakeholder approach to develop a policy that you will hear from Ms. Emmanuel in terms of the goals of the policy, what we want the outcome to be, and the time frame in which we want to have the policy. We are looking at 2024 to 2044 in terms of the timeline, and then after that we will look at how best we do our review Reviews are necessary because for disaster risk management in general is a moving goalpost. What applies today will not apply tomorrow. The other Thompson is here, Evan is here, and we all know that with climate change, our weather systems are operating differently. The Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricanes are becoming mainstay. You know, in the past we used to have mostly be impacted by Cat 3 at the highest level. Now we are talking about constantly having Cat 4, Cat 5 systems. So our global environment is changing, and so how we look at disaster risk management and how we look at the aspect of comprehensive disaster risk management, which has been something that has been pushed by CDMA for some time, and it has been taken on across the region. We now have to change our mindset to fit within the natural space in which we are operating. So this policy, I think, is very timely in terms of where we want to go as a country. And so I really welcome the dialogue this evening in terms of the input, because for us to have a comprehensive process and for us to build resilience across the country, we need the collective agenda and we need the buy-in from everyone. So I welcome the dialogue here this evening in terms of adding to the process and in terms of helping us to shape and finalize a process which is now at the green paper stage, and which we're looking at to push to be in a white paper and to be in the official policy of our country. So I welcome you. I thank you for joining us. I thank you for the input that has gone in so far in terms of all the members of the National Disaster Risk Management Framework. And we welcome the input of the general public, because whatever we do at the ODPEM and whatever we do as government operatives, it is to impact the country and to ensure that we are building resilience, building sustainability, and ultimately protecting lives. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the dialogue. Thanks.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Good to see everyone here. I want to just recognize the persons at the head table and persons in the audience. I see Fire is here with us. Evan, Digicel, Elon, Ministry of Health. So it's good to see everyone as we gather not only to discuss the strategies, but to reaffirm our commitment to creating a resilient and safe Jamaica for all. Securing, of course, the well-being of our country and communities, our people, very importantly, and livelihoods in this multi-hazard environment in which we exist. As we take this important step in our journey towards building resilient communities and safeguarding lives and livelihoods in the face of disasters. And this is something that we've discussed a lot at the board, and we welcome this policy, because hazards, whether natural, man-made, or biological, can strike without warning, and they can have devastating impacts on lives, livelihoods, and infrastructure. However, with sound planning, collaborative efforts, and proactive measures, we can minimize the impacts and enhance our ability to respond, bounce forward stronger, and recover quickly. In short, we can be resilient, and it is against this background that Jamaica's comprehensive disaster risk management policy for 24 to 44 is being developed as the country's first long-term national disaster risk management policy, and is consistent with national, regional, and global commitments. I wasn't at the ODPEM when it was created, but I'll take the credit, right? Because I'm here now, right? But it's good. The policy, of course, is designed to ensure that by 2044, Jamaica has strengthened its social, economic, and environmental resilience, significantly reducing and eliminating the negative effects of various hazards, including those induced by natural hazards, climate change, biological or health hazards, and man-made ones. Within this context, Jamaica's CDRM national policy framework places emphasis on identifying risks, disaster risk preparedness and reduction, disaster response, disaster recovery and reconstruction and redevelopment, disaster risk financing or financial protection, the establishment of modern and innovative legal and institutional frameworks for JCDRM and enabling social protection systems to be more shock responsive. And the goal that I really like there is goal 2, which is developing a culture of resilience, because that, I think, is the one, Richard, that speaks to everything that we need to do in terms of the preparedness for the country, because it depends on everyone here. The development of Jamaica's National Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management Policy and Strategy was led by, of course, the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development and the ODPEM, with the input of a wide cross-section of stakeholders in the public and private sectors, academia, local authorities, civil society organizations, including non-governmental organizations and community-based organizations. The draft policy was tabled in Parliament in July 2023 and subsequently approved as a green paper. And the policy, therefore, essentially focuses on ensuring that Jamaica achieves the vision, and I say here, more resilience and safe country, not towards 2044, but I think that the response that we had after Beryl was pretty good. We did recover quickly in those areas, and that was because of the coordinated efforts that happened at the time. So our goal today is to engage in open and constructive dialogue to shape a policy that reflects the perspectives and needs of our communities as we strive to develop strategies that are robust and adaptable to the realities on the ground. And I want to say here that it is a role of each and every one of us that is critical. It's not just a policy that's there, but you know, you can develop as many policies as you want, but if the people on the ground are not prepared, are not ensuring their resilience, and I see the firefighters here shaking their head, because that is really where everything happens on the ground, you know, and when people are not prepared, then everyone becomes the most desirable man in the country when the hurricane comes, you know, and you're a bit tired of that, right, everyone? So we want to give everyone a break. I want to ensure that everyone understands that it comes down to us at the individual level, as we have spoken about, Richard, to ensure that we are ready. And a simple thing like just the roofing structure, which we have Strappy, that's out there, right? And the reception was very good when we went out. So while we develop and present the CDRM to you, we are only too aware that every citizen is at the center of the success of this plan. And this is why we are having this town hall today, to give everyone the opportunity to share your perspectives, insights, concerns, and recommendations as we work together to shape national policy to advance our country's development. And it's important for everyone to participate, because we don't want to hear down the line that we were not consulted, because the ODPEM has, how many have you done so far now of these consultations? Huh? We've done a lot, and we have a few more left that we're going to do. So on behalf of the Portfolio Minister, the Honorable Desmond McKenzie, and the ODPEM Board, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude to everyone involved in organizing this event and to everyone here who is participating. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the sort of formal part of our agenda. you will notice around, there are many persons around who will be speaking today, but they will be speaking within the context of how their work and what they do will contribute to Jamaica becoming resilient and safe, right? So they're not coming here to talk. So the only greetings we had were these two, I was about to say two young men, but I'll leave it at that, two young men. For those of you who know me, you know that I feel very constrained behind here, but it's being live streamed, so I have to be behind here. So let's go. Now, for the persons online, we want to hear from you. You will not be able to speak to us here, for us to hear from you, but we're going to be using something called Mentimeter. So queue up your phones or your tablets or your computers to menti.com, and I will provide that code as we go along. I am actually looking for the clicker so that I can start, but I'm not seeing it. So why do we need, for example, a comprehensive disaster risk management policy in Jamaica? And the first thing that I want to show you is the many hazards that we are exposed to. So if I can get a change in slide, please. No, the PowerPoint, please. But I'm not seeing the clicker up here, guys. Where did it go? I think it could be at the nationwide table. Next slide, please. The PowerPoint, please. All right, so if we look at this slide here, and for those of you online, I am going to ask you to go to, when you go to menti.com, to put in the code 72480702. So menti.com, those of you who are here can do it as well, and I will provide Wi-Fi for you shortly. If you have Wi-Fi, just use yours, but you'll get some. 72480702. And this slide is really giving us a snapshot of the myriad of hazards that we are exposed to as a country. When the chairman spoke a moment ago, Dennis Chong, he said, we exist in a multi-hazard environment. And if you think about it, we could have an active hurricane season and have an earthquake at the same time. That is what multi-hazard means. We are exposed to many hazards simultaneously. And what that also means is that ODPEM cannot do this alone. And for this reason today, that is why we have with us the ministry. We have the Meteorological Office of Jamaica, your favorite person, Mr. Thompson. We have the Ministry of Health. We have NEPA. We have, I think we may have Finance and Planning, because you do hear Minister Clark speaking a lot about disaster risk financing. We have the Maritime Authority. We have the Water Resources Authority. We have the Fire Brigade. We have the police. And when you think of, and we have the Jamaica Defense Force, and we have UE, Earthquake Unit. So when you think about a policy and we think about disaster risk management and we think about the different hazards, you're looking at things like tropical cyclones, you're looking at rainfall, heat waves, floods, droughts, sea level rise, earthquakes, tsunamis. And then when we think of the environmental side, and we just, everything there from invasive species to storm surge to land degradation to coral reef degradation, those are all defined as natural hazards by the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Agency. But we also have a number of man-made hazards that we're exposed to. So we have oil spills, we have road accidents, industrial accidents, we have fires. In fact, I think we were in a consultation where someone said fires are not always man-made. We have terrorism, we have cyber crimes, and then of course we have biological hazards. And we don't have to think too far about how impactful a biological hazard can be. Just if we think of 2020 to 2022, and I mean, we're still getting COVID, right? I had COVID this year for the first time. COVID, right? We have human disease, we have outbreaks. So when you're at the airport, for example, and you see the little sign, no, what is it? No meat, no vegetables, no anything. Because we are also, there are hazards related to livestock. There is hazards related to agriculture that could wipe out our agriculture. And this list is not exhaustive. So I want to switch to my Mentimeter. So switch, guys. If we can switch. A quick switch to Mentimeter, menti.com, 72480702. That's the code. Write it down. And I want us to look at, I want you to do something called voting, which is you remember the hazards that we just spoke about. And I want you, whether you're here or are there ones that we missed, right? What are some of the hazards? I mean, we met with young people, for example, as part of our consultation process, and they included a range of hazards. And I'm not seeing anybody writing anything. So please feel free. 7248. You guys can write too, you know. Come on. This is what's the exciting thing, huh? The what? Menti.com. Do not go to mentimeter.com. Just go to menti.com and a code will pop up and you type in 72480702. Stani, write something there so that people can see what's going on. So, is there any hazard you can think about that you did not see? So, for example, I think, was it Carlene? We were talking about things falling out the sky in the consultation you were in. Was it you? Where we were talking about things coming out from space that we have to... What? Spell. B-O-L. Bolide. Right, things coming from space. Should our policy take into account that? For example, should our policy take into account the explosion of AI? So those are the things. Why is somebody writing test? A real hazard. So come, guys. So if you're online or if you are, please look on menti.com 72480702. And you could continue voting. So what we want you to think through, okay, so we have people there putting squalls. So that is not on the list that we have. So we would need to include that. Lightning is a hazard. It's actually there, but not a problem. Tsunamis, etc. So what we're trying to show is that we exist in this multi-hazard environment. But I want to ask you a question, and I want persons here to answer me. And it's a pity I can't move and walk around, so I would be taking the mic. I mean, I'll probably ask one of my students, one of you, come stand here, April. Do we have a mic that can roam, that we can go to people? Yes, we can take off that mic. I will repeat the code, 72480702. And you could continue voting. There are 72480702. Yeah? I just called you a young man. Live up to that. All right. What I want us to look at is when we think about hazards, we all have stories to tell. And I want to hear from Jamaicans here in this room, as well as through this vote on Mentimeter, what was the impact of beryl on you, on your family, on your livelihood? And can we hear from anyone in this room? Anybody? What was the impact of beryl? Right, Richard is saying no sleep. For me, I kept being on the computer trying to see, being Evan, is it passing? Is it passing? Has it passed? And at every little wind, I'm like, oh my, oh my. Anybody had a story? I found out when, right? So we're seeing some voting going up here where somebody is saying, they had minor impact. My house was affected, some damage. Continue to vote so we can see What are the stories? Is there anything? There are a lot of people in the back there who would like to speak. Why are you standing? Go down. ODPEM people are in front here. We're not talking to them yet. So someone said that their livelihood was negatively impacted, and this is very anonymous, this Mentimeter. So it could be somebody online, it could be somebody in here. We will not know, but it allows us, it provides us with information that we can use. Anybody wants to share any impacts that you have had? I'm going to ask another question, put it a little differently. There are some questions that are here that I want you to respond to as well. And then we're going to go into a formal sort of presentation. It is important for all citizens to participate in the development of national policies. And I think both Richard and Dennis alluded to that. Your voice matters in national policy because we all have something to say. I did an interview with Nationwide just now, and in one of our consultations in Sir William Grant Park, a young lady came up to me and she said she could not speak, but she heard everything I was saying. And that was mind-blowing because basically through her hands and her motions, and she had an interpreter, her aunt. Basically, what she was saying, how do you, in a policy, factor me in? I can't, if we had an earthquake, really, and I am stuck under, I need to be rescued, I can't scream. I can hear the rescue people, I can't move, I can't scream. What are you going to do? So her idea was about looking at different abilities, right? So we need everyone, we see consultations for housing, for example, where somebody may say, boy, you know, in 1929 there was a river passing through here, so you have to be careful. We may not be seeing a river now, but it passed through there. So your voice and the voice of people in policy matters. Now there's a little one here that ODPEM needs to take some, we're asking, we are doing a good job as a country with respect to disaster risk management. Out of 5, they got 3.6, which means they're doing some good things. But remember, disaster risk management isn't only about ODPEM. So everybody sitting down in the front row here and in the second row, you have to own what society is saying about how we're doing with respect to disaster risk management. Agreed? I only know Evan and Carlene's name right now. Right, Michelle? You got to own that, and you got to find a way to say, how do we get that closer to 4.7? Because we need to own the fact that whilst we're not doing a bad job, but people are saying that we can do better with respect to disaster risk management. So in a policy like this, we're setting sort of a long-term strategic agenda. It's not going to highlight all the actions we're going to take, but it's going to help us sort of decide what we want to see. And this is the idea of policy, right? You want to be able to close your eyes. We kept hearing a resilient and safe Jamaica. Can you close your eyes and see that? What does that look like? That looks like a barrel passing the same path it did, but having less impact on lives, livelihoods, and people. So if you close your eyes, you could see resilience, right? So, and of course, everyone is agreeing so far that we exist in a multi-hazard environment, and I'm liking the fact that you're voting. So for those of you in here, if you want some Wi-Fi, I can give it to you. Go to Galaxy A21512B. If you don't have Wi-Fi, if you have Wi-Fi, please use your own. And the code is P1VR4069. So if you don't have Wi-Fi, we want you to participate. Go to Galaxy, it's just Galaxy. Go to Galaxy and type in P1VR4069. And remember, you can look on the screen if you can see, I can't see. You can see the Menti code as well and just go there and continue voting. Another question we want to ask, we kind of breaking the ice, you know. What hazards are you most prepared for? And most people that have voted said heavy rainfall events. Less for hurricanes. Carlene, this is for you. Nobody has said they're most prepared for an earthquake. So you have some work to do to help ODPEM ensure that if we have a major earthquake, right? Extreme heat and heat waves. And that is new, right? So if we had a policy that was promulgated, let's say in 2014, as Richard was saying, that may not have included the sort of extreme heat that we're feeling now. But a long-term policy allows us to pivot and to make changes and corrective action along the way. So we'll always see new and emerging threats. And we have to be able, as a people, to really sit down and think through what could be new and emerging. So Dr. Dawkins here from Ministry of Health will probably tell you that one of the things we have is new, correct me if I'm wrong, please, new and emerging communicable diseases. You know, when we think of the mosquito, I mean, oh my, and all of the different diseases, and the link between that mosquito and Evans climate, right? Because remember, the mosquitoes kind of stayed dormant, right? And then we have a big set of rain. I mean, if we think of 2014, I remember we were all good. And then one weekend, just before school opened, I think, or just after September, we had a lot of rain. And then what did we have? A lot of mosquitoes. And then what did we have? We had chick-fee. That was 2014. Right? Everybody was getting chick-fee, except my son. So that's my story. He's allergic to mosquitoes, and he wasn't bitten. So everybody had chick-fee in the house, and he didn't. But we have that link with climate. But we also have that link with NSWMA and how we dispose of garbage and where the mosquitoes stay and breed and so on, right? And how we look after our backyard. So you begin to see all of those links with what we refer to as disasters. It is so multifaceted. We could connect everybody, all of these guys who are going to speak to us, we can connect them, right? Because disaster risk management, we really ought to connect the dots. How is one thing impacting the other? So come on, guys, continue voting. All right, so I am going to stop here and go back to the presentation for right now. Continue to vote. Menti.com 72480702. Anna, I'm not seeing you voting. Come on. And because I know you people's names, I'll call your names, so please vote. We want to hear your voice too. You're no longer a staff of ODPEM here today. You are John Public Jamaica, so vote. Okay, next slide. That's me again. Can I change it? You all seem a bit shy, and I can't walk down all over. But does anyone have any story that they would like to share about the impact of Hurricane Ivan, Tropical Cyclone Nicole, the May rains in 2018, the November 2023 rains? And I'll give you my story. Can you imagine? I am driving in that Friday, those November 2023 rains, and I work in this area. And this is to tell you how easy it is to make mistakes. I work in this area, and I'm driving through Norbrook, and I want to get home, and I see water high like this. I see a Prado going through it, and I says, oh, maybe I can go through it too. And then I was like, Liz, no, you can't do that. You got to turn around. And people were taking that risk of going through to cause problems for you guys, right? So, you know, we all have these stories, and we need to sort of begin as a country and as a society to document some of the impacts of these events on us. Because by documenting our stories, and in the Caribbean and in Jamaica, we have a very good tradition of storytelling, but that storytelling is also very instructive. So if anyone in here would like to speak about how they dealt with the earthquake last year, you know, we had these earthquakes, and I would imagine people sat at their desk and didn't do what they were supposed to do. Or you look out through the window and you say, oh, nothing not happening. Or we have rains, the May rains in 2018. How many people had family or friends who, that May rain of 2018, you guys would have been informed for, so these are some of my students, they would have been informed for, but Form 5 students could not go to school, and it was in the middle of CSEC. How many people remember that? So when we think about these events, it's just not an event happening that is affecting just one person. It affects sectors. I don't know if anybody remembers that, or if I'm the only person remembering that. People couldn't go to school. I mean, you know, there was stuff in St. Thomas happening and Clarendon, and I think, if I recall, the exam could have been math, which is an important and fundamental exam, right? So anybody wants to share their story of any event? Richard, you have a story to tell? You have a story to tell about any of these events? You have a story to tell? So you're saying you all have no impacts? You all don't remember Ivan? I remember Ivan with a little radio listening to Evan whole night. A little orange radio, and I'm like, I mean, you have a story? Come. We have to vibes up the thing, you know. We can't just listen to me for the whole night. But yes, I listened to you during Ivan for the entire night when it went through Hellshire Hills instead of going through. I remember all of that.
My only story or experience of a disaster was
Higher. Talk louder, sorry.
Ivan was my first experience of a hurricane where I think I have knowledge of what's happening. And I watched my neighbor rooftop blow off, like totally off. But when the eye was over us, everything is calmer. Person was up there trying to fix that, and the rain just suddenly come down and everybody's like scattering. That's my only experience of
a hurricane?
Actually seeing it, yes, up front. Every other time it's just seeing that regular storm passing through.
Ivan was my first experience of a hurricane as well, because I lived in a country that did not have hurricanes. So it was my first experience. But why are we developing this policy? And I think that based on our discussion so far, we kind of have an idea as to why we need to think long-term and we need to think strategically about disaster risk management. And one of the things that I'm not sure many people are aware of is that disaster risk management and the need to protect lives and livelihood is very much rooted in Jamaica's Constitution. Chapter 3 of Jamaica's Constitution, the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, calls for the right of everyone in our country to enjoy a healthy and productive environment, free from injury, etc., etc. So the call to have this sort of policy in place goes right back to our Constitution. So before we even think about, you know, the location and the geography and the geology and all of these things, we, as a country, that is rooted in our Constitution. Our geography, geology, we are highly exposed to several natural hazards. And I showed that slide before. If we're thinking about sustainable development as a country, and we're thinking about, we have a national vision, Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business, there must be a space for comprehensive disaster risk management, because we see where the little so-so rain sometimes cause major flooding. Not true. National Works Agency, right? Major flooding, and he can translate that flooding into an impact on the budget, right? And when you are giving away your money to National Works Agency, well, you're giving it away because guess what? If we're resilient, they wouldn't need it. And where would it go? It can go into education. It can go into health, right? So resilience is important. Striving for a resilient Jamaica is a national priority, because that national priority could then translate into us developing in other areas. And of course, we are signatory to all these different regional, national, international obligations. But that's secondary, in my opinion. People may take me on for it, but really and truly, it's about our thrust for development, recognizing where we're located, and also not discounting the work of our academics, because we have several academic reports coming out of the University of the West Indies, the University of Technology. We have a lot of reports that are pointing us in the right direction, and we need to embrace this as we design our policy frameworks, right? And then, of course, we have the double C, climate change. And climate change is really changing the frequency, intensity. It's unpredictable. I mean, this is the first time, I believe, in history, and I welcome the Ministry of Finance to come to the top. Taran, you can come to the front. Isn't it the first time in history, Evan, that we have had a Category 5 hurricane so early? First time, right? In the history of hurricanes, and hurricanes, they're about a long time. So the first time you're seeing a Cat 5 hurricane in July, that is telling us that we can't even rely on science, because what we know is that we look for the hurricanes around now, right? September, October, early November. But we saw doing Zeta and Iota, I believe. I mean, we were now in the Greek alphabet. And we were now like in December, right? Impacted by 2 hurricanes. The season's supposed to end November 30th, so the tourists can start coming from December 3rd. And we're in an act, and the season continue to be active. So climate change also pushes us to think about comprehensive disaster risk management. So we have, that's the rationale there. That's why we need this policy, and it's going to be important for us to move this paper from a green paper to a white paper. So for those of you who don't know, when policy is developed with stakeholders developing, everybody putting in their piece, it goes from so ODPEM as a technical agency will sort of not lead the way, but provide the technical support for the development of the policy. It goes to the Ministry of Local, its parent ministry, who then takes it to Cabinet. Cabinet reviews, discuss, they may or may not approve. If they approve it, it then goes from Cabinet to Parliament via something called a ministry paper. It is tabled in the House, it is discussed in the House, and it could be reviewed as a green paper, which is really saying it is draft policy. And this is where we are today. Once you're at a green paper stage, the paper literally walks out of Gordon House and comes back for consultation. So we make sure that everybody's views are accounted for. So this is where we are now. We have had a series of consultations with different groups, and we're having some town halls as well. All right? So your voice matters, my Mentimeter matters, so when I come back to it, you guys are gonna have to tell me, continue voting. But other things are important. We have some statistics here that says that 31% of our communities are vulnerable. And through this policy, we'll create the enabling environment to fix that. The first thing of making change is to recognize what is good or bad, right? So when we're sick, we go to the doctor and they tell us what happened. And that's where change can happen, because we get a prescription and we do what we need to do, right? So the fact that we're able to identify a negative is a good thing. So we know our deficiencies. 300 of our 900 communities are vulnerable, and we're going to fix that. And this policy will provide that framework. We understand that disasters have impacts on people, economic industries, tourism, agriculture, education, health, And they have, our Ministry of Finance is here, implications for public finance because it increases expenditure, gives more money to NWA to do stuff, pulling it away from other important sectors, and may also result in things like domestic borrowing. And our location, just where we are. Tourism, right? Tourism is a big thing. 90% of our GDP, or about that, is produced on the coast, making that GDP vulnerable. Our economic infrastructure is on the coast. So we need to put systems and structures in place to be able to not just identify the hazards that we're exposed to, but to put in place strategies to reduce impacts of hazards. Because how many people here, by a show of hands, a hazard is a thing that can happen, right? A car could be a hazard, right? Yeah, so if I didn't pull up my handbrake or whatever it's called there, the car could roll, right? And that could create a disaster, right? But a hazard does not have to become a disaster. How many people agree with that? So the people in the back don't agree? A hazard is not a disaster, but it can become a disaster depending on how vulnerable we are or if we are not prepared. Right? Okay. So this is our policy, and very briefly, it's a long-term policy. It's designed to ensure that by 2044, we are a resilient Jamaica, and that we can eliminate some of the effects of natural hazards, not natural, just hazards that impact us on a daily basis or regularly, right? So our policy focuses on identifying the risks that we're exposed to, finding ways to reduce that risk. There is a big, one of the other pillars is financial protection, putting aside monies for hazards and disasters before they happen so that they do not result in budget volatility, and Teron may say a few words on that. Then we need to be prepared, and we need to have, things can happen, but we need to ensure that we have mechanisms for recovery, right? And we recover faster, and we're not building back, because we're not looking back. You heard the chairman say bounce forward, right? So this notion of building back better, back is not a good word, forward. All right? So I want to ask a few questions about the vision statement, and I'll ask the guys in the back to go back to the other set of slides, the Mentimeter slides. During public consultations, during the development of the policy, during consultations with various technical groups, we came up with this vision. You know what a vision is, right? It's not to do anything. It's something that if you close your eyes, you can see it. So we all have visions for ourselves, our children, our lives, and it's not about doing anything. It's closing your eyes and seeing where you'll be in 20 years. So if you had a vision, stand here, what would your vision be for 20 years? For yourself. You have the mic in your hand.
Okay.
And it's not to do anything. What is your vision? What do you see when you close your eyes?
I just close my eyes. All right, so 20 years from now, I will be retired.
Living the life. Okay. Well, 20 years from now, I hope to be alive and not to be retired. I don't think I could manage it. I have to be working. Anyway, but when we think of, let's go back to this vision for Jamaica. We're saying a resilient and safe Jamaica. What does that mean? And we had several consultations that came up with that. But following the green paper, we've had a series of consultations where people have said, boy, I like it, but I don't know. I feel it should have words like for all. I feel it should have the word sustainable in it. I don't like the word safe. What say you? This is your vision. It's a national disaster risk management policy. If you don't want to say it to me, go to Mentimeter, because then I'm just going to start calling people. And Anna knows how much I love her. So Anna, what say you? You're not staff of ODPEM tonight. They can't do you anything. Pass the mic to Anna. So 17 people have voted online, and they said, I like it, I can see it. 4 people said, it is good, but I would add something. And 1 person says, boy, I don't like it. So if you don't like it, give us a call, raise your hand here, let us hear your voice, because we could amend this, right? It's not a white paper yet. Anna, don't tell us.
Resilient and safe Jamaica for all.
Okay, so Anna, and she's been very, what's that word? She has been a bit adamant that, it's supposed to be for all. And Richard says, well, it don't have to be for all, because we saying, what you saying, what you had said? We already have Jamaica in there. Once it's Jamaica, it's one Jamaica, right? But Anna, like many other people, are saying we need to have for all in there. And I called on Anna, not because she's adamant, but because what you call that? Your comment was not unique. It was something that I'd heard before. I just don't remember who I heard from, and they're probably not here, so you got to speak on their behalf. What do others think? Do we need to put for all to create that more inclusive vision? Because I think that's what people were getting at. Jamaica, yeah, but when you put for all, it means for everybody. And I'm seeing the lady in the red. Come, tell us something.
I like the idea of having the for all, alluding to what you mentioned earlier about persons who have special abilities, so to speak. I think when you say for all, it brings in, those persons in a meaningful way.
Okay, so it brings more meaning to the vision. Anybody else wants to say anything? Anybody in the back? You see, if I could move from here, but I can't. They will tell me I can't move. Yes, because of that. So by a show of hands then, if you all don't want to speak, continue to vote. People are voting. You see the thing going up. Again, I'm going to call the Menti code. It's menti.com for those persons online. Oh, can I ask the JIS team online to put it in your comments, please? The Menti code, menti.com 72480702. And you could actually continue voting until about 2 days from now. So people can continue. But can you please put it in your chat for me? Menti.com, code 72480702. And if Nationwide can do the same as well, we would appreciate. So, by a show of hands, because we can also speak with our bodies, by a show of hands, how many people like this vision? Raise your hands high. Well, you need to raise your hand. You don't have a choice. So what I'm seeing here, you don't like the visions. So you're going to tell me why you don't like it. Your hand was up before, but I never see it. All right. So let me see the hands again. How many people like the vision? All right. So we have a wide cross-section of persons in here who do not like it. And I want to hear why from some of you, because we need to make this vision representative for all, for want of a better word. My friend in the white shirt.
I want to expand it a little.
Okay.
A safe and resilient Jamaica especially for the most vulnerable.
Okay, a safe and safe and resilient Jamaica, resilient and safe Jamaica, especially for the most vulnerable. All right, I'm hearing some backbenchers here. You know, when you go to the movies and you hear the people talking, you're limiting the vision. Not you, Richard. Right, okay. What do people think about that? Do you like that? Anybody other than the person who said it likes it? Yes, you want to say something. Yeah, your wheels are turning. Come, say something. Come on. Get up. Come. Come and say something. Yeah, they're coming. It's coming to you. So you remember when we have a vision, we're closing our eyes and we can see it. So think about Beryl, or think about Ivan, or think about whatever, any event that could happen. When you are resilient and safe, what would it look like? So no matter what Evan tells you, you are prepared. You can sit back. So I'll give you a story before we go. I was talking to someone from TCI, and I think Oscar passed them yesterday, right, on the weekend. And they were also impacted by Hurricane Irma. And, you know, that really dealt them a blow. In fact, all of their schools, a small island, were destroyed. And they built forward better. So nothing was, you know, there was no impact. They were not afraid. And that's kind of where we want to be, you know. They felt as though they were a little more resilient than how they were in 2017. And that's how we want to feel. That's how Evan wants to feel. That's how Richard wants to feel. Go ahead.
All right, good evening, all. As the motto, Jamaican motto said, out of many, one people. So I think the word for all would fit in or tie into out of many, one people.
Okay, so again, another for all, wanting to see that notion that when we, in other words, what we're seeing is a sort of split in terms of bringing, there's one group of people who has more the emotion side for all. And there is the technocrats who are saying, yeah, you know, Jamaica is enough kind of thing. And we have to reconcile that. And neither of it is wrong. It's where does it resonate, right? So we might be going for all, right, Mr. Thompson? Okay. And 18 people says it's okay, but would for all change it? And would it satisfy more people, for example? Those are the kinds, when we have policy consultations, those are the kinds of things, you know, you'd have thinking through, you know, would it make a huge difference if we added for all? It may not make a huge difference to you guys, but for some other people, it would resonate better. And that's kind of like what we want. I'm not saying that's what we're going to do, but we have heard, and we have heard it multiple times. Continue to vote, please. Now, this is where our speakers are going to come in, and they can all jump for the mic at this point in 2 minutes. Now, you can have a vision for yourself, right? And I like to use people because it's easier for us to think. We have a vision for who we want to be. So I want to be a grandmother in a few years, not right now, because I only have a 15-year-old and a 21-year-old, but I kind of want to live long enough to be a grandmother and to have grandkids and, you know, to spoil some kids because I like babies and I can't have any more. So that's my vision for me. What is that? Okay, like they're trying to take away my vision, but you're here, so I feel protected. Because if it was really a gunshot, you would have done something, right? We have the police here with us, so. He would have protect me first. I know that. So we all have personal visions. And what is that for truth? You sure? Okay. So we all have a vision for ourselves. But to get to that vision, there are going to be things that we have to do. So we have lower level visions called goals, right? So if we think about it, you would have, like young people, they have a goal, I want to be educated. So I'll go back to my students, Tanya and April. They want to go do their masters. They actually want to work at ODPEM. So they have goals. They want to have pretty things. They want to have families, I don't know. So those are their lower goals so that Stania can retire by 2044, as she says, right? So just as we have our personal goals, a national policy, it has a vision, but to achieve that vision, it has to have a number of goals, all right? So we have this goal, this big word called mainstreaming, DRM, across all sectors and industries. So we have a goal that's focused on that. So to get to this resilience and safe Jamaica, what we're really saying is that all sectors must think about disasters, how it's going to impact them, how they're going to become resilient. So tourism has to think about it. Health has to think about it. Education has to think about it. Even the little lady, remember the Gleaner article about, like that, I never even thought about that. There was a Gleaner article about a seamstress. She says, we're in Clarendon, we need light because we can't sew the uniforms for the kids to go to school 2 weeks from now. Now, nobody thought, I didn't think about that. But that has an impact too. So how do we make her resilient, if you know what I mean? So we need to mainstream. Another area is a culture of preparedness and resilience. So the chairman said that's the one he likes best. Because if we have a culture of resilience, it means when lightning flashing, we're not outside. So where I live, when lightning flashing, I see people outside riding bikes. And I'm like, okay then. And you're like, and Jamaica have some serious lightning. But you're riding your bike outside. Is it that you don't know? Is it that you're unaware? Is it that you figure, well, the lightning not going to strike me, so I could still be in a pool? If you get what I mean. So a culture of resilience so that we reduce death, we reduce economic distress, we reduce social distress. But a big thing about this disaster risk management is laws and policies and sanctions. Sanctions isn't a good word because you want people to comply, but you need laws, you need policy, and we need to make sure they're modern and they're keeping with the modern age. So for example, do we have a policy on AI and how AI could have an impact on, I don't know, create some disaster, I don't know. We need to know what the risks are. What are we exposed to? Identify all that we are exposed to. It's like going to the doctor and doing what you call that thing when you do all the tests? What is it? An executive. So you sit down with your country and you say, what are we exposed to? And kind of look at, kind of copy and see what other people may be experiencing and kind of say, well, could this be us in 5 years or 10 years? So we need to identify our risk. We need to have adequate response and recovery. So, I guess I could say this one because it was public. JPS needed to recover faster, right? So we have the response. You have the JDF, you have ODPEM. We are good with response, but if we may need to improve in some areas of recovery. Some people are really good. So when the mountain fall down, NWA clear it before it reached the news, right? You're good with recovery. So we need to have those systems in place. And we need to safeguard our economic sectors, right? So tourism and so on, they need to embrace disaster risk management. MSMEs or small businesses, the little shop out there. How are disasters impacting me? What can I do? So someone once, in a consultation, they owned a bookstore. And, you know, they just ended up doing a really simple thing because it flooded every time and the books were on the ground, you know, in a bookshop. So you just raise the shelves. So if there is a flood, if water comes in, you don't lose your stock. And this is what, you know, it's just really recognizing that we're all exposed. And then financial protection and disaster risk financing. And that's the notion about having instruments in place for disasters before they happen, and recognize as much as we can risk mitigate and climate adapt, there may be some risks that we're still exposed a little bit. So Taron will say a little bit to you about Jamaica's disaster risk financing framework, things like insurance and things like cat bonds. You hear Ministry of Finance talking about it all the time. Our consultation is not as exciting as theirs in Halfway Tree we need to have one of those. One in Halfway Tree with the music and the DJs and so on. So our team here this afternoon is actually going to share with you online, and then we have some Menti questions to answer about the goals. So I'm going to leave that slide up, but they're going to come and each of them for about 2 minutes share what their stake is in this policy and which goal you're going to grab. Which is your goal? I mean, we're all related. All the goals are related. Why are they all sitting down? Nobody's coming up. Oh, Taron, come. Well, Taron has a goal, one goal in this policy, and that's goal, what goal is it? Right, so come and talk to us. Thank you so much for coming.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Taron Francis, here from the Ministry of Finance. Thank you very much, Liz, for having me. Good afternoon, personnel on the head table. Everyone here, this is a very important consultation that is taking place. Now, representing the Ministry of Finance, the particular goal within this comprehensive disaster management policy that pertains to the Ministry of Finance is Goal 7, which speaks to ensuring that there is an appropriate disaster risk financing policy framework in place to safeguard the gains that we have made over the years through many sacrifices of the Jamaican people. And so what the Ministry of Finance has done is we would have tabled in Parliament a disaster and national natural disaster risk financing policy. This was done in 2023, and the national natural disaster risk financing policy, it promotes a risk-layered approach to disaster risk financing, whereby we ensure that there are adequate reserves to deal with losses associated with high-frequency, low-severity events, natural disasters, while transferring the risks related to more low-frequency, high-severity events. So what we have done is have a multi-layered approach, because one layer cannot deal with all the hazards to which we are exposed. And so for some of the hazards, we have decided that we'll retain the risks. And some of the instruments that we have in place to retain the risk associated with more high-frequency, low-severity events are our contingencies fund that is capitalized at about 5 billion. Well, it was capitalized at about 5 billion at the beginning of the financial year 24-25. As you know, with the passage of Hurricane Beryl, funds would have been advanced from the contingencies fund to the various ministries, departments, and agencies to undertake the response effort. The thing with the contingencies fund is that it is actually an advance to these ministries, departments, and agencies. So once the supplementary budget is passed, that increases the allocation of these ministries, departments, and agencies, then these monies will be repaid to the contingencies fund so that we'll always have these resources available to respond following the passage of a hurricane or in the aftermath of any natural disaster. So we have also in place a natural disaster fund, which is actually overseen by ODPEM. We have as well, and this was just in 2024, established a National Natural Disaster Reserve Fund, which in the 2024-25 budget, we have allocated $1 billion to capitalize the reserve fund, but it will also be a repository for all the payouts that would emanate from the various risk transfer instruments that we have in place whenever the policies are triggered. In terms of the risk transfer instruments we would have had in place, we currently have a catastrophe bond that allows a drawdown of up to $150 million US. Now, the catastrophe bond addresses the impact of named tropical storms or named storms that meet the specific parameters in relation to the CAT bond. And so, whereas for the passage of Hurricane Beryl, that particular policy was not triggered because the central pressure of the hurricane passing through the various grids that would have been set up and aligned with the CAT bond, they were not sufficiently low in order to trigger the policy. We have in place as well an insurance facility with the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility with a segregated portfolio company. We have actually 3 policies. We have the excess rainfall policy, the tropical cyclone policy, and we have an earthquake policy. And interestingly, with the passage of Hurricane Beryl, the policies for the excess rainfall and the tropical cyclone would have been triggered, and Jamaica was able to benefit from 4.2 billion Jamaican dollars that would have been used to offset expenses related to the response and recovery effort. So this is one instance where we see the benefit of having in place these instruments, these disaster risk financing instruments, to help to mitigate the impact of natural disasters on the national budget. Had it not been for these instruments, what you would usually find is that the government would have to resort to additional borrowing, or it would have to resort to reallocating resources that would have been targeted for some critical expenditure. And so what you may have found is for the passage of Hurricane Beryl, without the triggering of the policy and the payouts to us, monies allocated to education, monies allocated to national security may have had to be reallocated in order to offset the expenses that were necessary to deal with the recovery, the relief, and the response effort. In addition to those instruments, we have in place a contingency facility with the IDB that allows us to draw down in excess of $300 million US. We have also we're currently in discussion with the World Bank in developing a DDO. It's a catastrophe deferred drawdown option where in the event of a natural disaster, we could actually draw down on these funds. Now, the contingencies fund and the CAT DDO, these are instruments that we will draw down on as a matter of last resort, for the very reason that when you draw down on these contingent credit facilities, it actually increases the public debt of the central government. And so we are having in place these instruments to ensure, as I said before, that we have ex-ante preparation. We have made ex-ante preparation to ensure that adequate resources are available to finance natural disasters when they do occur, so that we can preserve the gains that we would have made over the years from the many sacrifices that Jamaicans, all Jamaicans, would have made over the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Teron. I think there's a question for you from Mr. Chung. The one for ODPEM.
Right. So the question is whether the... Okay, yes, the contingency fund would have been capitalized at 5 billion. Right. No, so it's the... No, so it's not a matter of taking back. So what happens is the policy surrounding the contingencies fund is that the monies are set apart to assist with the response effort. Now, because when there's a disaster, it would have been expenditure that would not have been planned for on the part of the ministry departments and agencies. When they utilize monies that would have been allocated to them in the Appropriations Act, that money is then given back to them in a supplementary budget. But they would have utilized that money from the advance, right? So they actually get additional money from a supplementary budget, which they then pay back to the contingencies fund, monies that they would have utilized to undertake the expenditure.
All right, so we see, for example, thank you, Taron. Can I get back the slide, please, on the policy goals? It could be the actual PowerPoint in the back, the actual PowerPoint presentation. So we see where, for example, next slide, please, where Taron spoke about disaster risk financing. And we have quite a number of other persons who's going to speak about their role in comprehensive disaster risk management. So we have about 7 or 8 different persons to speak about how they will contribute to the realization of these goals over the next 20 years. So I'm going to call on anyone can come up. And you guys want to come? Anybody can come up. Do like Teron. Dr. Dawkins, you want to come up? Let's hear from some of the less known areas. We'll leave the best for last. You. Dr. Dawkins, sometimes, we don't think about, when we're talking about disasters, we don't think about health so much. We thought about it during COVID. So, Dr. Dawkins. And you could say which goal. I mean, people will have an idea of where health kind of, granted it may be all 7 goals, but let us know.
All right, thank you again and good night, everyone. So when we think health, it's kind of hard to put health in one of the goals. It will in fact span pretty much at least 4 of these goals routinely and generally. We can just think, for example, when we spoke about burial just now, if we had to get into what we need to do to become resilient and prepare for that particular hazard, there's a lot of things that, from a health perspective, we'll have to get into. So the matter of, for example, how do we educate persons and ensure that they take personal responsibility for their health and or medical condition, those are things that contributes to individual resilience and then by extension, household resilience, which expands into the community resilience. So how does mom who sits at home, who has her young children, and a mother who has an underlying medical condition, what do we need to do in terms of risk communication and community engagement and health protection and promotion? How do we help that individual household to be better able to manage their own health and the health of the persons they care for? So we have programs that we must ensure occurs throughout. So the disaster risk management perspective is in fact already a program, but we certainly, to realize the policies for taking resilience down to the very unit of persons, we certainly need to expand on how we deal with the matter of health and health considerations. So there are health considerations because of the hazard of infectious diseases, but there are health considerations related to other hazards. If, for example, we were to have a sudden onset, we spoke about earthquakes, for example, what do we need to do to ensure we can treat persons who become injured because of the event in and of itself? So as a responsibility for the health sector, we now need to get into how do we make the health system resilient to ensure that we can continue to provide essential services, health and medical services during and after the event to deal with the acute injuries and the long-term complications related to the event that would have passed. So we take measures in place to ensure, one, the healthcare workers are aware of their responsibilities and can handle it. The buildings that we occupy can withstand the forces and therefore be able to stand up to the threats. And also, how do we ensure that the supplies can come in to ensure we provide care, because it doesn't happen in isolation. Bearing in mind that our key resource, the human resource, the healthcare worker, could also be a victim, and therefore they themselves must render themselves resilient to be able to continue. So if we deal in the context of the full span of the policy, the health system itself must become resilient. So it cuts across all goals. But if we zoom in again on what we do to support some of the other functions, the health sector, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, is key to the vital statistics element of what we need to do in terms of tracking and characterizing the problem and knowing where we stand. So when we collect our data through our surveillance systems, which is the intelligence arm of health, that informs how impactful the event may be, or it will tell us who do we need to target our limited resources to render the unit household resilient. So our surveillance system is something that we need to track, and everybody participates in rendering the data collection mechanism. We just now are having a conversation around the fact, for example, put your mind in the context of what happened with dengue. Dengue is one of those conditions that we know about a long time, but now it's changing how it affects us as a population. We characterize it as, for example, hyperendemic. And guess what is happening? It is looking to happen more and more frequent, causing much more deaths and disability related to the incident. However, there is more that individuals can do to become resilient towards dengue in and of itself. But there's another arm of it. We now need to push what we call a One Health concept to be able to ensure that biological hazards are not expanding in terms of the number of things that we now need to consider. We now need to be able to strengthen the partnerships of key sectors with health for health partners, and that is what is going to contribute to the comprehensive disaster risk management policy and realization of the goals. That's in the context of our goal numbers 5 and 6, for example, in terms of the stakeholder engagements and the partnerships that we need to have. And when we deal in the context of risk identification, goal number 4, we just mentioned the fact that we are now morphing in terms of the biological hazards. So we got COVID, which was a brand new disease, and we would love to think that that's the only one that's going to come. But now we have to have something called disease X, because if it's not COVID, it's likely to be some other new condition that we will not know anything about, and all our wonderful health system would not be able to address until we learn enough. So how do we make the system such a way that it is agile enough that when disease X that new condition comes, which it will come, how do we adapt and adjust to contain that outbreak when it happens? So, just to, or 3 minutes, health has to cut across pretty much at the very minimum 1 to 6 in terms of realization of the goals, both in terms of the hazards we need to consider, in terms of the health system that we need to strengthen, and how do we ensure that at all levels in our systems, whether through health promotion and education, whether in terms of our case management and clinical care, how do we contribute to resiliency in the context of realization of the goal? Good? There you go.
So we are beginning, well, some of us may know, but we are actually beginning to see how different sectors, when we think about disaster risk management, it's several pieces of the puzzle, right? And it's not just one agency. Each has different roles to play. And every sector, including Digicel, would have to look at what your role is. And of course, you will have the opportunity, if you would like, just to say something in terms of this policy. Where do you see our telecoms, our lifeline agencies, right, fitting in a policy like this? But we have others, so anybody who wants to come up and speak. So we have our fire. Is it man-made or is it natural? Which one is it?
Some of the time it's both.
All right.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As a key stakeholder in Jamaica's National Emergency Management and Response System, the Jamaica Fire Brigade fully supports the development and the implementation of the comprehensive disaster risk management policy. This policy marks a critical step towards enhancing the country's resilience to both natural and man-made disaster. The JFB's mandate includes fire prevention, hazardous material response, firefighting, and emergency medical service, all of which align closely with the goals of the policy. We recognize that the impacts of disasters, whether from hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, and other disasters, place an enormous burden on our resources and personnel. Therefore, the JFB is committed to ensure that the disaster risk management is fully integrated into our planning and operations, particularly in the areas of preparedness, response, and recovery. We are particularly encouraged by the JCDRMP policy. The inclusion of disaster risk management across social, economic, and environmental sector is essential for reducing vulnerabilities and mitigating the impact of disaster. The Jamaica Fire Brigade looks forward to collaborating with other agencies to strengthen our nation's preparedness and ensure swift and coordinated response to emergency. By focusing on improving Jamaica's resilience to hazards and climate change, the policy aligns with the JFB's own efforts to enhance our response capabilities. Through training, capacity building, and public education, we are prepared to address emerging risks that threaten the safety of our communities across Jamaica. The policy's approach of fostering collaboration between government agency, the private sector, academia, the international partners is crucial, and the Jamaica Fire Brigades welcome the opportunity to work more closely with these entities to improve information sharing, resource mobilization, and the overall efficiency of emergency response efforts. In concluding, the Jamaica Fire Brigade reaffirms its commitment to supporting the successful implementation of the policy. We are confident that through a unified, multi-sectoral approach, Jamaica will be better equipped to face the challenges of disaster risk and achieve the vision of resilience and a safe nation by 2044. Thank you.
Oh yes, thank you very much. At this point, I'm kind of like in the middle here, asking if there are any questions before we move on. But I know there is a comment. Well, there are two comments. I didn't get your name. What's your name? I will speak to your comment. Gail? Barbara Dale, who's here with us, she wanted to remind us, she says it's a long policy, right? It's 2024 to 2044, and we need to remember that we need to be able on an annual basis to still do things like drills, right? Whether it's fire drills, earthquake drills, different drills, so that we continue to be prepared in the face of disasters. And then I have another comment here. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. And
my name is Robert Reed. The matter of food security in the event of natural disasters, I note here that there's the absence of the Ministry of Agriculture. I think we should have some discussions about it, because when we hear of a hurricane coming, the first thing we do is we run to the supermarket and stock up. And it is something that we have to put in the forefront. A secondary comment is awareness. After doing your vulnerability risk assessment, and before you actually go to implementation of action, I think we need to put in place another slot, and that is the issue of building the awareness of individuals and stakeholders as to what they need to do to prepare for disaster.
Thank you very much for those comments. And yes, the whole issue of food security is important when we're speaking about disaster risk management, as well as, and it's also going back to the whole, connected to the whole issue of drills, is ensuring that we're all aware there is awareness, because awareness is what builds a culture of resilience. We have a number of questions. I know the camera people are upset with me, but I can't get to the people unless I...
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am from the Safety and Security Unit at the Ministry of Education and Youth. My questions, I have a ton of questions, but I'm going to put them together. For our awareness in our schools, what is ODPEM doing? Is there an audit that ODPEM normally sends out with their officers to the school? I am aware that the fire brigade have their fire audit that they normally do on a yearly basis. Apart from our drills that we would have in the schools during January to February, where we advise them to do about earthquake awareness, is there an audit that can be done to provide awareness within the schools?
All right, I'm going to hold your question for a minute, and we will have ODPEM respond to it. I'm getting old, so if I forget, remember to raise your hand, I'll remember. And I'm going to go to just one more question before we go back to our presenters, so one more comment.
So I'm Akeelim Hamilton again. I'm seeing a lot of conversation about natural disaster. I'm wondering about man-made disasters, such as like a nuclear holocaust. That's kind of probably on its way in, possibly. Are we prepared for the financial fallout that may have, or the impact it might have on our system, natural resources, as well as several other areas of our society that will be greatly impacted for something like that, and other man-made disasters like biological warfare, things like those that will impact us severely as a nation. So I'm wondering, are we focusing in regards to that as well? Because I'm seeing a lot of talk.
Yes, we are, because whilst we may be focusing here on natural, the policy takes into account other types of hazards, all right? And it also looks at risk identification, all right? So trying to seek out potential risks that we're exposed to. So just asking someone from our team who, you can go. So we're going to invite Ms. Colleen Black from the UE Seismic Research Unit to speak to us. With climate change, we seem to be forgetting about earthquakes. So she's going to give us a wake-up call this afternoon.
Evening. This comprehensive disaster risk management policy is a key milestone as it assures Jamaica a successful transition into being an earthquake-resilient nation. It sets out clear goals to mainstream disaster risk management in all aspects of government, industry, and our communities. This means, not implies, the mainstreaming of earthquake safety and preparedness. Of course, with mainstreaming of earthquake safety, we have actually hit goal 1, and for earthquakes, I would say that we would be hitting all the goals, including financing. In terms of reducing mortality and economic losses, we should be reminded that Jamaica is facing the earthquake hazard, which is ever present, and we are always exposed. The earthquake activity is a clear and present danger, which we as individuals and as a nation cannot afford to encounter in an unprepared manner. The magnitude 5.6 earthquake of October last year was a good reminder that although we experience hundreds of earthquakes every year, very few are felt, but that doesn't mean that the strong ones, the dangerous ones, cannot occur. Of course, with this earthquake, to date, we have had more than 165 aftershocks. So aftershocks is also another area which would touch on sensitization and risk identification, because I'm sure the Ministry of Health did not think that they would have to be dealing with trauma after an earthquake. But the fact is that many persons are now so traumatized that the slightest vibration they feel, they're calling the earthquake unit to ask if it was an earthquake. With this policy, we will prepare individuals and communities for what will happen, such as aftershocks, and once they know what to expect, then we can have the proper social interventions in place to alleviate any such trauma if they find themselves overwhelmed. Historically, the island has had quite a few damaging earthquakes, which has cost the country many precious lives as well as great economic losses and destruction of infrastructure, as we saw with the 1692 Port Royal earthquake and the 1907 Kingston earthquake. Further to this, earthquake hazard is a hazard that can trigger other hazards, such as landslides, liquefaction, tsunami, and fire, which can then increase the losses that we face as well as impede our ability to respond to a major earthquake or any other disaster, as we are a multi-hazard nation. With this in mind, we can make our plans for whatever may come to us. Incorporating this comprehensive disaster risk management policy in all aspects of development and daily life will ensure reduced mortality and destruction from earthquakes and enhance our ability to respond effectively, as the other hazards which can also occur once they are triggered by the earthquake would also have been considered and mitigated against, thus reducing the need to build back better, as all future constructions and endeavors will be done in an earthquake-resilient manner. Achieving this goal of comprehensive disaster risk management will not only save us unnecessary grief and losses, but also ensure a safe, prosperous, and happy Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Black. And now we have a few more speakers. We have Met Office, we have NEPA, Maritime. Anybody else? The police. Anyone? You all can just come forward. And we have some questions that remain to be answered. Mr. Thompson, we have a question about the audit. Yeah, I can move it. You want me to move it? Sure.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Director General Richard Thompson and the Chairman Dennis Chung, other stakeholders, good night. Good night. Seems like I want to leave it, right? I know that we are tired and want to go home after a long day, right? I am Gary Francis, an Acting Assistant Commissioner of Police, representing the JCF. And just to say that the development for publication of a National Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management Policy is really a demonstration of resilience. And that is really commendable for our country and for this Jamaica Constabulary Force. Commend ODPEM, of course, although we are really a stakeholder and a part of this, but this is high commendation. And to this end, we have no hesitation to register our continued support, dedication, commitment to this policy. This is not something that we do because we like it or we love it, but it's really a part of our duty to do. And when we look at the 7 goals, we recognize that we are either directly or indirectly supportive of all of them, even goal 7, because if we don't secure this place, then BOJ may not be able to speak as resilient as he did. Anyway, so we have been supporting the whole risk management from time immemorial. However, in terms of formalizing this policy, our commitment remains even more resolute. And just to share with you that the JCF responsibility in disaster risk management in terms of preparation, response, and doing is really multidimensional, right? For example, we had COVID in 2020 into 23, and we recognized that our role was, so we had to ensure that persons are secured in their environment without spreading this disease, so to speak. So our role is really robust and multidimensional. But just to say that in terms of, generally, what are some of the things that we are committed to do and our capability that is. So we have a well-established ecosystem that we have over 220 service points in the form of our police stations that we can, 1, respond from, and 2, gather information to impact response. And of course, the JCF worked along with all the agencies, because without that kind of networking, our work is really maybe null and void. So it's really about information sharing. So we actually have established a number of policies and SOPs for us to operate in order to deliver that kind of service. We have a well-developed earthquake policy. We have a hurricane standing order. As a matter of fact, between last year and this year, we have received over 150 bomb threats, which in themselves are disaster/disaster in waiting, and we responded to those with our partner MOH and JFB, and as a result of that, we have developed a policy to deal with that within the organization. So we are responsive to all of that. We have liaison officers across all parishes. We have a well-developed command system, a call-out system to support this kind of response. We also have some aspect of drone capabilities to conduct surveillance, to support response and even preparation. We actually have a GIS system that assists us in our dispatching and the location of our assets to effectively respond. We have a well-connected system of stakeholders and networking. We have a robust coordinating system between multi-agency, and we actually have the police emergency communication center that links the entire operation in terms of disaster response. The recently acquired communication system by ODPEM is connected to all our major units to enhance clear communication, effective for response. We have a cadre of well-trained members to respond, and of course, stakeholder partnership will provide additional kind of support. So at this time, I will say nothing else but to commend ODPEM for this. This is more than just an initiative, it's a project by itself, and we stand committed as we make Jamaica far more resilient for 2044, and we believe that the vision is sufficient. Right? And I may just say that we believe that the vision is sufficient because Jamaica is Jamaica, and it includes both creatures, great and small. So to say, what was the additional word? For all, we seem to leave out the other creatures. Is Jamaica safe with all the ecosystem that support us in total? So we're supported by that, right?
All right, we have, I think, 3 more to go. We have Evan, Dion. You all run for the finish line. Anybody who's ready to run. You see, he ran first.
Good evening, all. I'm Kenry Valentine, representing the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, a state agency that I'm sure many of you would be hearing about for the first time. Now, the Maritime Authority of Jamaica is a state agency with regulatory responsibility for shipping in Jamaica's maritime space. Now, Jamaica being an island nation, naturally, over 90% of our trade is via ships. And that comes with some danger. So on one of the earlier slides, you would have seen oil spill as one of the hazards that we would have been exposed to. Ships rely heavily on fuel oil in order for them to move through the ocean. And as you can imagine, one of these ships coming into Jamaican waters veered off course and probably run aground, then we're going to have an oil spill which can impact on tourism. Possibly it may happen somewhere close to the channel, blocking the channel. We may not be able to, import, have other ships coming in with supplies that are much needed for the state. So what we do at the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, we are a member of a Caribbean Memorandum on Port State Control. We have what we call Port State Control Officers. And what Port State does, it provides Jamaica with the legal framework to board any foreign ships trading with Jamaica, inspect those ships to ensure that they're complying with safety measures and pollution prevention measures. In the event that we board one of these ships trading in Jamaica and we recognize that they are not complying with the required standard, both international and local standards, then we do have the ability to detain those vessels. Similar to what the police would do with, they stop you on the road, your car is defective, and they'll call the wrecker. Well, we can't call a wrecker, but we can detain that vessel for as long as it takes to ensure that whatever issue that we would have identified is actually rectified prior to that vessel departs from Jamaica. So what that does for us, though, is that over time, we have developed a reputation as a state that will not accept substandard ships coming into our waters. So we had a situation a number of years ago, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, where a particular shipping line would bring ships into Jamaica, and every time the ship gets to Jamaica, they would be detained. It got so bad that the agent for the ship would actually call the office to inform us that the ship is coming, allow them a few days to sort out things before we actually board the ship. Eventually what happened, the company sold the substandard vessels, bought new vessels, and now we have better quality vessels actually trading in Jamaica as a result of that. Also, through being member of the International Maritime Organization and ratifying certain conventions, Jamaica has ratified the International Convention on Civil Liability for Oil Pollution Damage. What this affords us in the unlikely event of a spill from one of these vessels trading in Jamaica, we do have the ability to claim on this fund for any damage that may have occurred as a result of this spill. All right, so in a nutshell, pretty much that's what we do at the Maritime Authority of Jamaica. Thank you.
So we're seeing various links with different entities and the disaster risk management framework, and again, strengthening the position that it's very joined up in terms of getting resilience. It's not a one-man show. So we have limited time, and I see Evan still sitting down, and one of our favorite agencies, National Environment and Planning Agency, and we welcome Ms. Dion Chambers from NEPA to speak about that link between all of those wonderful ecosystems and disaster.
Good evening, everyone, and all protocols are observed. I'm glad the time is running out, so I'll be very short. Notwithstanding the National Environment and Planning Agency, we have the critical role of developing our natural environment in a sustainable manner, and we also ensure that the built environment is being done in the appropriate way through orderly development. One of the things that we have recognized, and we have been playing a supportive role with the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, is to support all their initiatives that addresses resilience, disaster management, or risk management. And this initiative to create this Jamaica's comprehensive disaster risk management policy is one such activity. What we do, we work essentially through a policy framework, and in that regard, our critical function is the preparation of development orders. And in preparing these orders, the orders addresses development in all the areas that it covers. We have parish development orders, we have special development orders, but as it stands now, the entire Jamaica is under what we consider to be proper planning jurisdiction. So to support the administration of the development orders, what we do, we have a very robust application management system, and in so doing, we have a technical review committee this committee arbitrates over all applications that come into NEPA, and that would basically be anything over 9 lots. 9 lots and under would be dealt with at the municipal corporation level, of course with our support. The development orders are prepared through a participatory mechanism, and it addresses several strategies that focuses on the management of disasters. We look at the promotion of rainwater harvesting. We promote soft and green parking facilities, formulation of special conditions of permits. And in this area, I want to just single out the matter of hazardous waste facilities. So our bauxite mining plants, for instance, we have special policies that govern their activities. With the threat of a disaster, more the weather, the climatic ones, what we tend to do, we have a protocol that we have to basically roll out at that time. And what it asks these entities to do is to shut down where possible the sections of their facilities that would lead to major overflows. So there are retention ponds, those have to be closed off to ensure that we don't have any major spills. We have moved to establish no-build zones, or we have areas where we have limited development zones for those areas. We have overwater structures. We also utilize the hillside development policies that is done or administered through the Mines and Geology Division. And we ensure that we are building out what we call our interactive GIS system. And what this has done, it has mapped out all sensitive areas, particularly along the coastlines. We look at our wetlands, we look at our forested areas, and we look at the critical sensitive areas. And what we do when we have the development applications, we overlay these to ensure that we're not going into vulnerable areas. We also play a role when we're doing the development orders to sensitize communities, or what we consider to be local planning areas, on areas that are highly susceptible to disasters. We also have we play a secondary role to the ODPEM as well, and we assist with doing this damage assessment, post-disaster damage assessment, and we also use some of the information garnered from the assessment to strengthen our policy directives and framework. We do quite a bit, and sometimes it is not understood because developments, sometimes they fail from time to time, but we play a critical role in ensuring that we integrate disaster risk management in all our policies and in our robust application processing mechanism. We also play a role in the competitive area. I think it may have been goal 7. We also play a critical role in goal 2, and we also play a role in goal 4. But basically, because development is dynamic and it covers all the sectors across the country, we basically have a role to play in all the policy goals for this policy. But generally speaking, we support the activities of the ODPEM, and we stand ready to provide whatever comments and assist in ensuring that we integrate it in our strategic operational plans. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I am Stephen Shaw from the National Works Agency. I'm stealing 2 minutes out of Evan's time just to speak to what we have been doing for quite some time now, which is really supporting that which the ODPEM is seeking to accomplish by 2044. Now, one of the things I note that the word safe is part of the vision statement. And if you look at our tagline, developing safe, reliable, and quality roads, that's what we aim to do. How many persons recall 2006 when Gustav visited us? Not many people may recall that the eastern side of the country, St. Thomas and sections of Portland, they were inaccessible from Harborview side because the Dry River Bridge, that had collapsed. And the crucial thing as fuel, getting fuel from Kingston to that side of the country was challenging because the fuel trucks could not go through the junction. We didn't have the north-south toll road. And so to get to sections of St. Thomas and Portland, vehicles had to drive from Ocho Rios. Now, one of the things that we have been seeking to do over several years, certainly since the advent of the Works Agency, which is 23 years now, is to build some amount of resilience into our structures. And so our bridges, we take into consideration the fact that we're really in an earthquake zone. So you may be driving on a bridge and you feel it moving. It won't fall because we have built it in such a way that it does take into consideration the fact that we do experience tremors. Our roads, you find that especially the arterial network, we have lifted most of these above the normal water mark because we want to ensure that there is some amount of resilience in the network. Where it is that we can use concrete in the building out of our roads, that too is part of what we have been doing. And you can look at the Fern Gully where we did a mix of concrete and flexible pavement, asphaltic concrete, recognizing that that corridor was carrying a lot of water. We have not really had a challenge in that space, even though we have had several storm events since Gustav. The gorge, the Bogwalk Gorge, we have done some amount of concreting there. And so where it is that we can do so, because, what we're seeking to do is to build resilience into the network so that when these hazards, these natural disasters hit us, we are in a position to recover and recover quicker than in the past. All right, so we're really taking on board what it is that we are seeking to accomplish here by 2044, and we are part of the discussion and will continue to be involved. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Evan Thompson. I'm from the Meteorological Service. And I am, just thinking about where we fall, where the policy goals are concerned. Basically, we are with Policy 4, where we talk about how we identify the risks and assess these risks and also anticipate risk. And of course, do some amount of projection in terms of the risks that are developing from time to time. There are some people who believe that my work really just starts in June and it ends about November because hurricane season is all I live for. But the truth is that these hazards really have no boundaries, and we have hazards that are impacting us at all times, at the beginning of the year, the end of the year, right throughout the year. And sometimes, mention was made earlier, that there are the cascading hazards. There are a number of hazards sometimes occurring at the same time, and we have to be prepared for those. And the work just keeps going and we keep active. But the hurricane season, I wanted to just point to the hurricane season first of all. October is not all over, by the way. We have another month to go, so prepare yourself. But as we think about hurricanes. In itself, the hurricane is more than one hazard because we have to consider the heavy rainfall that we're going to be impacted by. We have to consider the strong winds that will impact us as well, which is what categorizes the hurricanes in the first place. And then we have the other things like the storm surge flooding that is also of concern. There are the landslides and the lightning and the tornadoes. I mean, some of you didn't realize that in hurricanes quite often there are tornadoes. And even with systems that have affected Jamaica, we have had the tornadoes occurring during those hurricanes, and we have the evidence of that. But what we have to do is to be able to identify these risks, to know what the hazards that we're going to be impacted by are in all of these systems that impact us. So we have to think about all of those. We think about the heavy rainfall, and then what do we do now to make sure that our population is prepared for the heavy rainfall that they could experience from some of these events? It might not be a hurricane, it might really just be a tropical wave, or it might be a trough, a buzzword these days, you know, the trough. But that trough could also produce some rainfall that creates a kind of flooding that can really be devastating. And so we have had to be seeing what are some of the ways that we can not only identify, but we can help people to be better prepared, create a more resilient nation just by assessing these systems in a better way. So we have introduced a number of things. By the end of the year, knock on wood, we'll have the radar back in operation in Jamaica. And so that will help us to identify rainfall where it occurs over the island, but also where it is going across the island. And we can pick up some nowcasting, some systems or hazards that we can nowcast in terms of short-term forecasting using that radar. So we can tell you about the squalls and the squall lines before they move into your area. We can tell you that you're going to be having severe lightning storms in certain areas and how it will move from one community to the next because we have that kind of capacity. So we're looking forward to doing that. We have introduced the weather app recently. How many people have the weather app on the phone? Jamaica weather app. Well, I need to see more hands than that. So I hope that all of you will look for it in your Apple store or wherever you go, your Play Store, and find that weather app. It is very useful and it helps you to know what to expect where rainfall is concerned, but also lightning impact. We also tell you about wind impact and some other things, even humidity. So you can track some of these things, temperature included, as you go from day to day. And that is important for us to prepare ourselves and to ensure that we become a resilient people. There are some things that we didn't think were going to be as frequent as we're now experiencing them, like droughts. We used to think that drought will only occur every now and then, but then drought seems to be an every year occurrence now. And so we have developed over time a drought index that helps us to be able to identify that risk ahead of time, 3 months ahead of time. We can tell you that you're likely to experience drought conditions, and so you should prepare yourself for that. And so we set up many of our stakeholders like the National Water Commission and the Water Resources Authority to prepare themselves for that low amount of rainfall that could produce the droughts. We also recognize that bushfires are something that are so much more prevalent these days. Maybe this year wasn't a poster year for bushfires, but the Fire Brigade knows that in recent years we've been having just so many bushfires. So we have introduced a bushfire index that is also being used even today. Every 2 weeks we produce the output from that index that is shared with the Fire Brigade so they can have an idea of whether bushfires could break out in certain areas. And that tells you that the fires are not always man-made, but sometimes we do have climate conditions that contribute to the development of these fires. There is something that I don't think is really an emerging hazard, but it's a hazard that we have ignored for many years. And because of climate change, because of global warming, we're now considering, I don't see any other women with the ladies with the fans in their hand right now, but it's just becoming so regular that the fans are everywhere. Everybody walks with a fan because the temperatures are so high and it's harder to deal with them. So you have the heat stress that you have to deal with, the temperature increase that you have to deal with. And so we have to be monitoring those. And we are actually in the process of developing with the Ministry of Health a heat health warning index that is going to be rolled out to the population eventually, where we'll be able to tell you that the temperature is going to rise over the next week or 2 weeks, and it will be excessive, or we'll have it color coded, whether you're going to have orange coding for your temperatures or your heat index, or it will be red coding so you know what to expect in the week to come and prepare yourself. So all of these we're continuing to monitor. Thunderstorms and lightning are something that we don't pay much attention to, but I know we're talking about it with ODPEM a lot these days. And we also have introduced a lightning detection, at least one system that we're using as a pilot, and we're now looking to see, and we are seeing where the lightning occurrences are right across the island from time to time. So as the hazards are anticipated, we have to find a way to be able to properly analyze them so that we can pass the information to you so that you can prepare yourself for these hazards. That's really what we're about, and that's what we consistently try to accomplish. So I'll leave it at that. A few other notes here, but I think that is enough just to tell you that we are focusing our attention on risk analysis, risk identification, and of course the forecasting of the risk, recognizing that some of the hazards that we've always ignored are now becoming in-your-face kind of hazards because of climate change, which is something we also have to continue to monitor. We're coming out very shortly with our new climate normals for a new period going into 2020. And with that one, it's already completed. We're just getting it peer-reviewed now, and then we'll be putting that out. So we can tell you that the climate in Jamaica is actually changing. We talk about it globally, but what is happening to our own climate here? How is it changing, and how, therefore, we're seeing more hazards that we need to be identifying and preparing you for? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Evan. We have one more person, and then we'll do just a few questions. Come, Jeffrey. And as he's coming up, we thank our persons online who are looking. Several persons are viewing it. I was actually looking at it with Evan right next to me on JIS for a moment. And we have put in the Menti codes online. So if you feel to vote, please go ahead. It will be open until tomorrow. All right?
Thank you. I'm Jeffrey Marshall from the Water Resources Authority. This is the authority with mandate for managing, allocating, conserving, and measuring Jamaica's water resources in terms of surface water in rivers and groundwater. And we have always been a long-time partner of the ODPEM in disaster management. And our main contribution, of course, is in the aspect of water. Many of these hazards deal with how water impacts people, impacts the environment, from flooding, drought, etc., as Evan said. And for the RRA, it's a matter of both immediate impacts in terms of like flooding from riverine flooding, where we have our early flood warning system that's currently in operation on the Rio Cobre in Bogwalk, and we're looking at implementing similar items or similar systems in Montego Bay and Port Maria, that in partnership with other partners. So that immediate flooding is collaboration with ODPEM, Met Office, and other stakeholders. But more than those immediate impacts are the long-term impacts. Evan spoke a while ago about drought, and we have seen in recent times that drought is an issue that is very significant, and it's not just an immediate thing, it's a long-term, long-going hazard, and there are different types of drought. Evan spoke about meteorological drought at that index, but you can also have hydrological drought, where the meteorological drought leads to lower stream flow levels, lower groundwater levels, and then you have agricultural drought, where these low water resources impact crop production. So in terms of the plan, which does have a drought management policy, that drought management policy, I believe, would look at all different types of drought, not just meteorological drought, but the wide-ranging impact, and see how that index can be further quantified, that we can look at that long-term hazard and how that will be managed from those three aspects. And additionally, one item that should be considered that many times isn't in terms of climate change is the impact of sea level rise. Because when sea level rises, that will impact on your groundwater resources. You might have a well in this location and it's been pumping fresh water. You've been adhering to your conditions, not over pumping. But then when the sea level goes up through no fault of your own, the well now becomes saline because the seawater interface has been pushed further inland. So that's a hazard that has to be looked at in terms of how the water resources that we have might be impacted by climate change, and that itself may be a disaster risk that has to be managed in the long term. So the Water Resources Authority remains committed to assisting in disaster risk management. We may not be as upfront as Met Office and others in terms of immediate impact, but wherever water is impacted, we will be there to ensure that it's sustainably managed and that we will handle that hazard properly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey, head of the Water Resources Authority. I think that for those of you here, those of you online, you basically, and if anyone else wants to say anything, you're free to come up, but basically you have seen and heard the linkages between this policy and the work of several agencies. So really to get to that resilient and safe Jamaica will require all of these entities who, you know, did all the nice speaking and nice talking, really hitting the road with the ODPEM, who would lead the implementation in collaboration with the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. But we will need your support and also the support of our academic institutions. We would need the support of the private sector, civil society organizations, and you, persons out there. So once again, if you would like your voice to be heard in this policy, we are asking you to vote on the Mentimeter platform, menti.com. I actually put it in the JIS live stream, so you can go there and pick it up. I've said it so many times. So online and here, menti.com, 7248-0702. Unless anyone wants to ask a question. I know there was a question about the auditing in schools, and I will ask, you want to ask a question? Okay, can I ask that a mic go down in the back, please? What's your name again? Mr. Thompson would speak to you after. Go ahead. I'm asking someone to take a mic down to you. But your question about the auditing, Mr. Thompson will have a word with you right after the event. So you can come up here. Thank you. But as Tanya is going down with the mic, we just want to really thank everybody. In the days of technology, sometimes we can engage in these types of consultations in our cars, at home, and so on. So don't look at the empty hall and think, well, nobody was there. I think I saw hundreds of people online, if I'm reading it right. And that's good. So we can say that persons have listened and have provided input. And we will see input on the Mentimeter platform as well. Go ahead. Introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Thanks. I believe one very notable stakeholder that was absent tonight is JPS. And when you have a disaster, we saw what happened in St. Elizabeth, Manchester, Westmoreland. Production gets completely, people protest more about light and water. Light, because it's not just, it affects everything, you know. It affects cell phones, charging, the whole works. Tailor shops, barbers, what have you. So it's not really a question. I'm going to make a recommendation if I can. I believe that after an earthquake or a hurricane, it gets very hot again. So what ODPEM could possibly do, and I'm not a technical person, I'm just thinking, some kind of solar solution, right? I know it's not just pick up a solar panel and put it out there, but if ODPEM could have some kind of a storehouse of maybe some portable solar solutions, I think it would probably solve some of the frustration. That's all. And just to also add, the gentleman from Ministry of Finance who spoke about the cat bond. I would like to know why have a cat bond if it's going to end up increasing the national debt. He said that.
No, I don't.
That's what I heard.
No, the cat bond will not increase the national debt per se. It wouldn't.
It wouldn't. So
No.
I heard
that,
wrong.
because those are proactive disaster risk financing
All right.
instruments compared to what we refer to, like before we had these instruments like insurance or cat bonds and so on. What the government would have to do in many cases is get what we refer to as debt relief.
Okay.
And many people assumed that debt relief, just the word relief, it kind of sounds like a grant, but it actually was a loan, a faster dispersing loan from your multilaterals that could add to your debt stock. So it would not add to your debt stock per se. Your point about JPSCO, I think that the policy has to reflect the importance of what we refer to as lifeline ministries. So that's like your energy, lifeline agency, sorry. That's like your energy, your water, as Dr. Dawkins was saying. When we think about disasters, immediately I think health starts to think about other diseases that can emerge. I mean, we've had countries in the Caribbean after a natural disaster event. If, for example, a major water treatment plant goes down, think about all the diarrhea, the different issues that can emerge. But what I'm going to do, though, for your question, I'm going to ask Teron, before he leaves, to just sit in the back with you for a moment and just explain the cat bond to you. I think you'd appreciate that. So it's the man in the back. And I think Teron will want to talk to you and ensure you understand. So thank you. Any other questions or comments before I turn over to Mr. Thompson? From my side, I would really like to thank you, those online and those here, because you made my time enjoyable. So thank you very much. But officially from ODPEM, which I'm not from, Mr. Thompson will give that wonderful closing.
Two lines in closing. All right, good evening again, everyone. I think it has been a long night, but a rewarding night. I heard that we currently have in excess of 500 persons online, and I think that's very good in terms of getting the information out there to persons and getting persons participating in the process. Persons would have heard from all the stakeholders. And as I said to Nationwide earlier, when we speak about disaster risk management, the disaster risk management framework in Jamaica, and we speak about join-up government, is the only true, personally I think, not the ODPEM perspective, but Richard Thompson's perspective, that personally I think that the disaster risk management framework is the only true join-up government process in Jamaica. When you look at everybody which is involved in the process, we talk about the systemic natures of disasters and what happened and how it impacts various sectors and various entities. Everybody have to come together to ensure that what we are doing is impacting the country, and we are building sustainability and we are building resilience. So when you go to a National Disaster Risk Management Council meeting, it's basically everybody across government. So that's a very true join-up government process. And in order for us to impact the entire country, we have to ensure that we are looking at every single sector and look at extensively at the most vulnerable sectors. So the component that speaks to mainstreaming, all the goals are critical in terms of achieving national sustainability, or we build our integration into the Sendai framework, into the CDM framework and strategies, you name it, all the international and global agendas. But when you look at mainstream in disaster risk management, it is the one that impacts all the sector. And when you are impacting all the sector, you are building comprehensive resilience across the nation.
That's one of the ones that stand out for me in terms of how we mainstreaming, which is extremely critical to what we have to do in terms of building what I love to call, and Michelle love it as well, anti-fragile economy, right? And building anti-fragile sectors. So when you look at the economics of disasters and what you have to put in mitigation and preparedness, and what you save at the back end in terms of your response and your recovery strategies, it is important that you're looking at your vulnerable sectors, and your vulnerable sectors that impacts greatly your GDP, tourism, agriculture. We all see the spin-off from the impact of Beryl. Couple parishes, but it's one of your main agricultural parishes. And you're feeling it in your pocket. You go downtown to shop. You see the prices that is there in terms of agricultural commodities. You can't get bananas. You can't get plantains. It's systemic in terms of the impact. So we have to ensure that we are looking comprehensively across all sectors, and that we are doing the work necessary to build resilience. So let me thank everyone for participating in this. I think the next one is we'll probably have to go out into the square out in Aftertree. Follow our good friends from the Ministry of Finance, where you can get persons passing through. I think one of the things is that you'd want to be in a location where persons see something happening and they go and they hear what is happening and they can participate. You impact the general public a little bit better that way. So that's something we have to look at in terms of the other consultations that we have to do to finalize the policy. But let me thank everyone, representative from the ministry, and everyone and the work that has been done by the ODPEM team in terms of leading the process and the overall work from our parent ministry to guide and lead the overall process of building out our comprehensive disaster risk management policy. You can't do anything without starting at the high strategic level. So it's like having your constitution and all the other laws trickle from that. That's what we have to do in terms of ensuring that there is a comprehensive national policy and everything else spin off from that national policy. So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, and do have a wonderful evening and safe journey home. Godspeed, and we have some refreshment at the back, so you can stay a little and join us, and you can have conversation with all my technical persons, Mrs. Tucker Abrams, Ms. Edwards, all the other persons, the very famous Thompson, the famous Thompson, Evan. You can have those conversations, and our very goodly doctor from the Ministry of Health. Always good to see you. Thanks very much, everyone. I think it was for the chairman.